Hello, my name is Steve Bowler and welcome to the Juniper vLabs lab number 3. This is going to be the vSRX Firewall Security Zones Untrust Zone lab. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to configure and explain the basics about security zones. We're going to configure an untrust security zone. We're going to configure a security policy to allow communication between both the untrust and trust zones. And we're going to do some show commands to verify proper connectivity and to help troubleshoot issues. So the lab is going to also have a GitHub link in the description of this video where you can go and download the initial configuration that we're going to be using, and then it will also contain the step-by-step guide for following along and performing the whole lab. So let's take a look at the diagram that we're going to be using. This is the Juniper vLabs lab number 3. We are going to be using the, if you go under the vLabs of the JLabs website, you can, and we show you how to do that in Juniper vLabs number 1. We're going to be using the security, the zone/policy lab. So if you want to launch that, it takes about 15 minutes for that to load. We've already loaded that up so that you guys don't have to sit through that process. And this is what the network looks like. We have 2 hosts in trust zone and then 1 in untrust. What we're going to do specifically in this lab is we're going to perform some connectivity tests between host 1 and host 3. Host 1 is in the trust zone, host 3 is in the untrust zone. So let's go ahead and get started. So once you launch the lab, it's going to take about 15 minutes for everything to load. So we've saved that time for you. You don't have to wait for that. I'm going to go ahead and SSH into our devices. So we'll get into host number 1, host number 3, and then the firewall, which is the virtual SRX. And so if we go back to GitHub, the initial device configuration is there for you. And so what I've done is I've already pre-staged the lab, and the first part of the lab is basically, if we go to the step-by-step, we're just deleting the security policies and the security zones. So that comes pre-staged. We're going to take that off so that we can show you and build out our own personalized lab. So the first part of this lab is, if we go back to the diagram, we're just going to set up a simple ICMP policy from host 1 to host 3 to allow communication between the trust and untrust zone. So this is going to be traffic leaving our network and headed to an external or an untrusted network. So we'll go ahead and simulate this traffic first. What we'll do on host 1, so we're going to start a ping to 10.100 13.2. We'll just do a count of 10. We're just going to start that to show you that we do not have connectivity. So currently there's no connectivity between host 1 in the trust zone and host 3 in the untrust zone. So what we're going to do is go to the vSRX, and we're going to start by doing a monitor interface on 000. Let's go ahead and clear the interface statistics first. Okay, now let's start the monitor on the interface. And then we see we have no packets in or out of the interface. This is 000. This is the directly connected interface to the firewall to host 1. So that traffic from host 1 to get to host 3 should be going through 000. So let's start the ping. We'll go to the firewall and we'll see that traffic coming in, nothing is coming back. So that's what we should encounter. If we go to the vSRX, the command line, if we do a show security packet drop records, it's a great command. I'm going to go ahead and clear this. I was doing some stuff earlier. Okay, so I've got that cleared. Let's do the show command again after we do the ping. And so what this command is going to show us is traffic that the firewall is dropping. This won't show up if we do a show security flow session, which is a great command that I like to do. I'll show you that later on. Well, we can see that it says that it's dropping it due to invalid zone. So let's go ahead, and we have no zones created on this yet. If you want a more detailed explanation on zones, you can watch the vLab number 2 where I go into that. But what I'm going to do is create the zones now. And the first zone that I'm going to create is called the Trust Zone. And then I can also add the interface in at the same time as creating the zone. So I'll do that to save time. And we'll add gig E 000.0. So that's the interface from the vSRX to host 1. So now I'm going to go ahead and create the Untrust Zone. And that is, if we go back to our diagram, that's from the vSRX to the host 3. And that's going to be gig E002. So 2.0. We'll go ahead and commit this and quit. You might see this message on the command line. You can ignore that. That's because of the virtualized environment, the lab environment that we're working with. So let's go ahead and start that ping again and see what happens now. So if I start the ping again from host 1 in the trust zone to host 3 in untrust zone, it's still timing out. We go to the firewall. If we do a show security packet drop records, and it's listed by the newest events being shown first, we can see that ICMP traffic, it's being denied by policy. So we've seen this before if you did vLab number 2. And what this means is that we need to create security policy to allow this traffic. So that's what we're going to define now. Our first security policy that we're going to create is going to be from the trust zone to the untrust zone. So let's go ahead and create that. So it's going to be from zone trust to zone untrust. And then we can give it a name. So we'll just call it allow ICMP. Sorry, you have to put policy here. Allow ICMP. And then we have our conditions. So the first condition is going to be to match source address ini. And then the second one is going to be to match destination address any. And we're going to do this just for simplicity. In a production environment, obviously you wouldn't want to allow all traffic. You'd want to match based on specific subnets, etc. And then once we have our match on our IPs, or the subnets to source and destinations, we're going to match based upon application. In this case, it's going to be ping or ICMP. And then our last condition in the policy is going to be a then statement to permit traffic. So let's go ahead and commit and quit out of configuration mode. And if we go back to the VMX, we'll go ahead and start the ping again. And as you can see now, our ping is successful. If we go to the vSRX and do the command show security flow session and hit enter, let's go ahead and start the ping again. Go back to the vSRX while that ping is running. And now we can see the ICMP traffic. So this command is great. I kind of explained it a little bit in the vLab number 2. What this shows is traffic coming into the firewall, and then it's going to show traffic coming back to the firewall. If this is a successful connection, you'll see packets and bytes incrementing in both directions. That's a bidirectional flow. That's what we want to see. So we have traffic coming in on 11.2 and going to 13.2. If we look at our diagram, 11.2 is host 1, 13.2 is host 3. So we see traffic coming in 000 going to 002, and then we also see that traffic returning. So that's a good flow. So another command that's very useful to do if you are trying to determine if traffic is hitting the security policy, you can just do the show security policy hit count. And if I hit enter, you can see that it lists our security policies. And we have from zone trust to zone untrust, the name of the security policy, allow ICMP, and we do see a hit count of 30 packets. So again, that's a very useful command when troubleshooting, whether or not traffic is hitting a specific policy. You can also see in the security flow session command, the policy name that the traffic is hitting. So let's go ahead now and try the reverse action. So that's going to be from host 3. If we try to ping host 1, let's see what happens. So we'll go to host 3 and we'll start a ping. And that's going to be 10.100. The destination is going to be host 1, which is 11.2. And we'll just do a rapid count of 1,000. Excuse me, sorry about that. So if we go to the vSRX, what we can do is we'll do a clear security packet drop records. And then let's do a show security packet drop records. So as we can see, the firewall is seeing traffic sourced from host 3, which is 13.2, going to 11.2, which is host 1, we see that ICMP traffic being denied by policy. So this is what we want to see in this type of environment. We don't want untrust traffic from an external source being able to reach a trusted device through the firewall. That's literally the whole point of the firewall, is to block this traffic. So our job as engineers, technicians, operators, our job is to allow specific traffic through security policy to go from the untrusted or external zones to the trusted or internal zones. So the next part of the lab, what we're going to do is we're going to simulate traffic from host 3 coming into host 1 from the untrust zone to the trust zone. We're going to simulate 443 or HTTPS traffic. We're going to do that by going to host 3. We're going to do that since we're running a VMX, which is a virtualized Juniper router. We're kind of limited on all the commands and traffic that we can simulate, but I found out a way that we can do this, and that is simply to go to the VMX, and we're going to run the telnet on port 443 to generate this traffic. So if we go back to host 3 and we start that command, so we're going to do a telnet to 10.100 11.2, again that's host 1. If we do a question mark, you can see that I have the option for port to specify a port. So we're going to do that. We're going to specify port 443. Now before I do this, I'm going to go back to the vSRX, and as you've probably guessed, we're going to clear the packet drop records. So currently we have 0. So going back to host 3, I'm going to start the 443 traffic. And as you can see, it is trying to send traffic. We'll go back to the vSRX. We'll look at the packet drop records. And we can see now that we have some traffic. So this is from 13.2 connecting to 11.2, which is host 1. And that traffic is being, the destination port is 443. And we're again seeing a drop by policy, denied by policy statement. So what we need to do now on the vSRX is create that policy to allow 443 traffic, which is very common to see in a lot of networks. We want to open up 443 traffic to specific servers that live within our trusted, our internal network. So let's go to the vSRX and start configuring that policy. So in this case, we're going to do the inverse of what we started with, and that was allowing traffic internal from the trust zone to go to the untrust. Now we're going to do from zone untrust to zone trust. And the policy we're going to create is going to be called allow HTTPS, our secure web traffic. And we're going to match source address of any and destination address of any. For simplicity of the lab, we're going to do that. So I'll show you in a different lab how we can match based upon specific subnets using addresses and address books and address sets. But we'll do that in a different lab. In this, we'll just keep it simple. We're trying to learn the foundations. So we'll just match any source to any destination. And then the next condition is going to be our traffic type, our application. In this case, it's going to be HTTPS. So if I just hit the question mark, you can see that I have Juniper gives us by default many ports and applications that we can use. So in this case, we're going to be using HTTPS or 443. So once we have our match conditions, we're going to perform the action, and that's going to be with the then statement, and we're just going to permit this traffic. So we'll go ahead and commit and quit out of configuration mode. Let's go back to the host 3, and we'll try that telnet connection again. So this time you can see it appears that the connection is refused, but that's just due to the nature of what we're trying to do. If we go to the vSRX and we look now, there's a few commands we can do. We can do the security flow session. We have to be kind of quick with this. So once we hit enter on the host 3 and go back to the firewall, we should be able to see this traffic. Let's do something here. Security. So what we're checking for here is to see if that traffic is still being denied. Okay, so the security flow session isn't hitting that traffic yet. We'll fix that. Let's do a show security policies hit count. And what we can see now is that our policy from zone untrust to zone trust to allow HTTPS, our 443 traffic, we have 4 hit counts. So this is a good simulation to test. We basically tricked the VMX, or we tricked the firewall to think that this telnet traffic was going to the destination port of 443. Let's go ahead and start some more of this traffic. And we'll see if we can get this firewall to pick this up. Okay, sorry about that. So I figured it out. I just had to pause the video for a second. I didn't want to bore you guys. But what I had to do to show the traffic in the security flow session on the firewall was I went to the vSRX and I do the command show security flow session pipe refresh, and this allows us to continuously refresh the command. You can do this with a lot of show commands. It's very helpful. So it will also keep your session open. If you need to walk away for a minute, you don't want the idle timeout to drop your session from the appliance, the firewall, the router, whatever type of Juniper device, you can do the refresh. You can also put a timer in. So we'll just do the refresh in seconds. We'll just do it the regular interval. And then now go back to host 3. We'll simulate that 443 traffic just by hitting up arrow and enter a few times. We're going to try to simulate that traffic quickly. And now you can see that session. So this is hitting policy allow HTTPS. This is the new Untrust to Trust security policy that we created. The source of the traffic is 13.2, which is host 3. The destination is 11.2, which is host 1. So the source is Untrust. The destination is in the trust zone, and the destination port is 443. We have bidirectional traffic. So that's traffic entering into the firewall. Let's go back to the diagram. We have traffic entering into the firewall, hitting host 1, and then we also see that return traffic, which is what we see on the firewall, the out statement. So that's it. That's the end of the lab. Wanted to keep this one somewhat short. Just to summarize what we did in this lab, we showed you how to create security policy between the trust and untrust zones. We had a ICMP, or a policy to allow traffic from the trust area to go to the untrust zone. And then we had 443, or we simulated HTTPS traffic from the untrust zone to hit a simulated web server, which we did at host 1. We used host 1 for that simulation. So if we go back to GitHub, you can see that the repository has been created, and I'm going to put a link to this repository in the description of the lab on YouTube. So I want to thank you all again for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next one.